Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari 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 Yashoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Raja Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana 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 Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Gauranitaya Jaya Gauranitaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Gaur Haribol 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 Nitai Gaur Haribol Nitai Gaur Haribol Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Chakacharya Asotar Tata Shri Srimad His Durga Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakund Radha Kundagiri Govardhana Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Ganga Devi Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Brihat Mridanga Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you guys all for coming. Yeah, so what we'll do is, we have the Sanskrit on the board. So what we'll do is, we will just, I'll briefly read the Sanskrit, and if anyone wants to try, then we can try. It's quite long purple actually. And then we can just have some discussion. Okay. Okay. So the Sanskrit is Na tvi evaham jatu nasam na. Oh, yeah, sure. No, please, yeah. Na tvi evam jatu nasam na tvam nema janadipa na cheva na bhavisyama sarva vayam ataparam na tvi evaham jatu nasam na tvam nema janadipa na cheva na bhavisyama sarvavaya matoparam. Okay. Anyone like to try? Nati evaham jatu nasam na tvam nema janadipa na cheva na bhavisyama sarve vayam ataparam. Nati evam jatu nasam na tvam nema janadipa na cheva na bhavisyama sarve vayam ataparam. Nati evam jatu nasam na tvam nema janadipa na cheva na bhavisyama sarvevaya mataparam. Okay, the word for word translation by Srila Prabhupada. Na, never. Tu, but. Eva, certainly. Aham, I. Jatu, at any time. Na, did not. Asam, exists. Na, not. Tvam, you. Na, not. Ime, all, these. Janadapi, apiha. Kings. Na, never. Cha, also. Eva, certainly. Na, not. Bhavishyama, shall exist. Sarvavayam, all of us. Ataparam, hereafter. The translation. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And the purport. In the Vedas, in the Katha Upanishad, as well as in the Svetashva Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of all innumerable living entities, in terms of their different situations according to individual work and reaction of work. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is also, by his plenary portions, alive in the heart of all living, of every living entity. Only saintly persons who can see within and without the same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and only saintly persons who can see within and without the same Supreme Lord can attain to perfect and eternal peace. Nicho nichanam chaitanas chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidati kammam tam atmastam ye nupasyanti diras tesham shanti sasvati netaresham. Katha Upanishad 2.2.13. The same Vedic truth given to Arjuna is given to all persons in the world who pose themselves as very learned but factually have a poor fund of knowledge. The Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living entities, both in their conditioned and in their liberated situations. The Supreme Lord is the supreme individual person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. The Mayavadi theory that after liberation the individual soul, separated by the covering of Maya or illusion, will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the supreme authority, nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Krishna clearly says that herein, that in the future, also the individuality of the Lord and others, as it is confirmed in the Upanishads, it will continue eternally. This statement of Krishna's is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much, even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue that the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual but material. Even accepting the argument that the individuality is material, then how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Krishna affirms his individuality in the past and confirms his individuality in the future also. He has confirmed his individuality in many ways, and impersonal Brahman has been declared to be subordinate to him. Krishna has maintained spiritual individuality all along. If he is accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in individual consciousness, then his Bhagavad Gita has no value as authoritative scripture. A common man with all the 4 defects of human frailty is unable to teach that which is worth hearing. The Gita is above such literature. No mundane book compares with the Bhagavad Gita. When one accepts Krishna as an ordinary man, the Gita loses all importance. The Mayavadi argues that the plurality mentioned in this verse is conventional and that it refers to the body. But previous to this verse, such a bodily conception is already condemned. After condemning the bodily conception of the living entities, how is it possible for Krishna to place a conventional proposition on the body again? Therefore, individuality is maintained on spiritual grounds and is thus confirmed by great acharyas like Sri Ramanuja and others. It is clearly mentioned in many places in the Gita that this spiritual individuality is understood by those who are devotees of the Lord. Those who are envious of Krishna as a Supreme Personality of Godhead have no bona fide access to the great literature. The non-devotee's approach to the teachings of the Gita is something like that of a bee licking on a bottle of honey. One cannot have a taste of honey unless one opens the bottle. Similarly, the mysticism of the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees, and no one else can taste it, as it is stated in the 4th chapter of the book. Nor can the Gita be touched by persons who envy the very existence of the Lord. Therefore, the Mayavadi explanation of the Gita is the most misleading presentation of the whole truth. Lord Chaitanya has forbidden us to read commentations made by the Mayavadis, and more that one who takes to such an understanding of the Mayavadi philosophy loses all power to understand the real mystery of the Gita. If individuality refers to the empirical universe, then there is no need of teaching by the Lord. The plurality of the individual soul and the Lord is an eternal fact, and is confirmed by the Vedas, or as above mentioned. Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnananjana Shlakaya Jakshur Unviditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pasyatate Shatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so yeah, we'll just have some discussion on this. It's quite a long purport, so yeah, we can try to take out what we can from it. Yeah, so I guess the first thing that when I was kind of reading this that was standing out to me was how one of the first points Prabhupada makes is how it says the Supreme Personality of God is the maintainer of innumerable living entities. And then he again repeats it later where he says that the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living entities, both in their conditioned and in their liberated situations. And so this was very interesting for me because when we're singing this bhajan initially, we sing Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari. And this Gopi Jana Vallabha, what's the translation of this? The translation of this Gopi Jana Vallabha is that Krishna is the maintainer of the gopis, you know. And so then when we go a bit more deeply into that, Krishna's then saying that, okay, he's the maintainer of his gopis, who are the dearmost devotees, okay? They're the dearmost devotees to Krishna. And why are they the dearmost devotees? Because their love is completely unalloyed. There's no tinges of jnana or karma. It's completely free of any of this. And so this is actually what's pleasing to Krishna. And so there's a very sweet exchange in this. We hear the philosophy, and the philosophy says, okay, Krishna's the maintainer. And if we hear that, we're like, okay, fine. I hear it and it's there, it's nice. But then when we have more context to that, then we can start to relish this philosophy. So when we give context to what's being said, and if we go more deeply into that, what does it mean? When we hear that Krishna is the maintainer of his gopis, we also hear that it's if you break that down, what's it saying? It's saying that Krishna is being in reference to someone else. Krishna here he's being referenced as a maintainer to the gopis. Okay? If you take in this secular world, if you say you're in reference to someone else, you would say, I'm the son of the king. Okay? You then, the importance, the person of importance is the king, no? So you're saying you're the son of the king. And then when people hear this, they go like, oh wow, you're the king's son. So it's all in reference to that. And so similarly here, Krishna is actually, what he's saying is that when we say Gopi Jana Vallabha, he's saying his personality is in reference to his devotees. So he's saying that for him, his devotees are most important. Isn't that sweet? How is it actually possible that the infinite and the infinitesimal, how is it that the infinite becomes less important than the infinitesimal? Actually, it's not impossible. It's not possible, but because Krishna is inconceivable, it's made possible by him, and in his view, that's what's important to him. So actually, when we read this scripture, there's a lot of relish to be had here. Similarly, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, another scripture, one of our scriptures, there's a pastime where Lord Chaitanya, who is none other than Krishna himself, in the role of a devotee, he comes, and what happens is he wants to have a pastime with one of his associates, Gadadhar Pandit. And in this pastime, what basically happens is that he wants to make his associate angry. You know, he wants to make his associate angry. And so he tries to act in such a way so that Gadadhar Pandit becomes angry. And like any kind of relationship is as well, if you have a friendship, if you have a partner or anything, sometimes you'll try to make the other person angry just to have to have a laugh or something like that. So Lord Chaitanya is trying to do this. And what actually happens is that in all of Lord Chaitanya's efforts, he's not actually able to make Gadadhar Pandit angry. And Gadadhar Pandit's mood throughout all of this is that he's very submissive, he has this mood of submission. And what basically happens is that his mood is that he's actually being treated unfairly by the Lord. The Lord treats him unfairly and puts him in a very awkward situation. And then what happens is that the Lord sees the mood of his heart, and he's actually melted by that. And there's a few verses, I couldn't find them, but there's a few verses, and it's very sweet because it says right at the end that he says that I am Gadadhar Pandit's property, and he says that I am Gaur Gadadhar, you know? And so again, I'm Gaur Gadadhar, I'm Lord Gauranga of Gadadhar. So the same theme that goes on, you know? So actually for Krishna, who's important is his devotee, you know? So it's a very, very sweet exchange that's been going on here. And so then what Srila Prabhupada actually describes right at the end of this purport in the last paragraph, he basically says that, I'll read it out. He says, the non-devotee's approach to the teachings of the Gita is something like that of a bee licking on a bottle of honey. One cannot have taste of honey unless one opens the bottle. Similarly, the mysticism of the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees. And Srila Prabhupada then goes on. And so this is the point. So our scriptures, they actually have to be understood in context. They can't just be understood in an isolated manner. When I was thinking about this, the way I thought about it was, sometimes you have these like clothing racks. And then when you have these clothing racks, you can then put hangers on them to hang certain clothes. And so what I was thinking was in our scriptures, and you have these like pillars of knowledge, okay, that are just facts throughout our scriptures. And off those pillars, you then have the hangers, and the hangers are like the details of the scripture, so which you can understand all the nuances by. So we have these pillars, like for example, that Krishna is who? He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And who are we? We're always his eternal servants. And that never breaks. That relationship never breaks. So those are the pillars. And then the hangers are the details by that. Okay, how does Krishna come as the Supreme Personality of Godhead? In the 3rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear about all these different incarnations he comes. And so then you have the details of that. He's a Supreme Personality of Godhead. But he comes in this way. But he comes in that way. You know? So in that case, as Srila Prabhupada is saying, there's individuality. Yeah? So we have these pillars, and this is why Srila Prabhupada is saying that these books, they can, where does he say? He speaks about this poor fund of knowledge. I can't find it exactly, but he's condemning the Mayavadis and just intelligent people in general. Yeah, here it is. The same Vedic truth given to Arjuna is given to all persons in the world who pose themselves as very learned, but factually have a poor fund of knowledge. So this means the source of their knowledge, where they're getting the knowledge from, is incorrect. It's not based on a foundation of truth. And unless the hearer actually wants to hear the truth, has a desire to hear the truth, then that truth won't penetrate the heart. So this is yeah. So then the question is, okay, we've heard that there's some taste to be had, there's some pleasure to be sought here from these teachings. Then the question is, how do we uncover that taste? I remember when I first read the Gita, I really had no idea what was being said. Still working on it. And the funny thing that I read it through, and the things that stood out to me, Srila Prabhupada just repeated again and again and again that Krishna is who? He's the proprietor of everything. He's the controller, and he's the enjoyer, and the well-wisher of everyone. But I always remember hearing these same statements again and again and again, and I was like, okay, I've got the point. I've got the point. He's the enjoyer. I get it. And when I used to hear that he's the enjoyer, that was a difficult one for me, because it was like when I heard that someone else is the enjoyer, I was like, nah, but I want to enjoy. But Krishna's the enjoyer, but nah, I want to enjoy. Where's my pleasure in all of this? Him being the enjoyer. It didn't make any sense to me. But similarly, as we're saying, when you actually get to know who Krishna is, see his pastimes, you understand that all his enjoyment is only with his devotees. In the Krishna book, one of Srila Prabhupada's books, he basically says that Krishna alone is not very beautiful. He actually says Krishna only with his devotees is very beautiful. So we have to understand all this in relationship, Yeah, sorry, I digress. So yeah, anyway, so this point of just, we hear the philosophy, but unless we have a background of knowledge, it won't really make sense to us. And then the question is, how do we actually then start to process this? How do we start to relish this? And so there's a nice verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam which basically states how 1.2.17, which says Shrinvatam Sakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridayanta Stoi Bhadrani Thank Thank you. Ridonoti Suritsatam. Which basically means that one who's engaged in this, one who has an eagerness to hear about Krishna. When one hears about Krishna, Krishna gets involved in that person's life. And what happens is he then cleanses the heart of all these material desires. And so Srila Prabhupada is basically saying in this purport, he says that if one has envy, they don't have qualification, they have no access, Srila Prabhupada says, to taste this Bhagavad Gita, if they have envy. So then our job is, how do we remove this envy? And in this verse, Srila Prabhupada says that, Shrimvatam Sakatash Krishna, but by this eagerness of hearing this Krishna Katha, what happens is Krishna within the heart sees this eagerness, and then he says, oh, my devotee is eager to hear about me. He then starts to clean. He then starts to clean this heart, you know? Just like Lord Chaitanya in his pastimes, all he's doing is he's cleaning the Gundija temple. And what happens is that you have all the devotees cleaning the Gundija temple. But then what happens is Lord Chaitanya is always doing more cleaning. You know, they end up making the piles, and who's always made the biggest pile? Lord Chaitanya's always made the biggest pile. The devotees are trying their best, but they can't make as much as Lord Chaitanya. So similarly, we're trying our best in devotional service, but actually the Lord is doing a lot more than we think. He's doing a lot more cleaning than we think. Shishi Radha Gokulananda ki jai. Shishi Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. Shishi Gornitai ki jai. So this cleaning process is going on. And as this cleaning process goes on, what then happens is, in the next verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it then states that Nasta Praishu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki, which basically means that when one engages in rendering service to the pure devotees, this one act, and then this regular hearing of the Bhagavatam, this Bhagavat Shravana, when one engages in these two processes, then the Lord becomes an irrevocable fact in that person's heart. And so then what does this mean in this context? Because from our teachings, we understand that the Lord is always there. So how is it the case that he becomes an irrevocable fact? The actual understanding of this is that the realization of that person is that they realize that the Lord is always present. So they're now in constant contact with the Lord. And so actually there's steadiness. So this Noishtaki refers to a stage in our devotional progress of Nishtha, where one is very steady in the devotional practice and very attentive and focused, and one's faith is very firm. And so when one's faith is very firm, there'll be a fixedness in their attention to Krishna. So because of that, they're aware constantly that Krishna is in their heart. And then we look at the third verse of the Shikshashtakam, and what do we hear? Kirtaniya Sadahari. One is always chanting the holy names of the Lord. Nityam Bhagavati Sevya, this constant rendering of service. So at that stage, this relationship, this eternality of the relationship becomes an actual realization. So similarly, in the verse, Krishna's telling Arjuna that never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So that means there's a process by which this is going to be realized for us. There's a process by which this statement will be realized for us, and it will take this time. But as we go on this process, what happens is Krishna consciousness is very exciting, because as we go on this process, it's like you're going on a journey somewhere. And when you're going on a journey, you'll have different signposts and things on the side that will tell you, okay, look, you're here right now. You know, so say you have your sat nav. You put in an address to go to Bhaktivedanta Manor. And then what happens is you then, as you're going, you at the start you may be a bit unsure that, okay, is this actually going to get me there? I've not done this before. I've heard some other people use this Uber app. Okay, it seems to work. Then we put it in and we try it. And then what happens is that we start to go on the journey. And as we see the map, we see that, okay, the car's going this way. Okay, I then see this shop on the side, and it's saying I see this shop on the side. We pass this other shop on the side and we see, okay, that's also there. So similarly, as we go on this process of devotional service, we will see certain symptoms which will then be manifest in us. And when we see these symptoms manifest in us, according to the scriptures, we can then take note and say, okay, this is what's happening. The process is working. The cleansing is working. I can see manifestations of this process working. And then what does that build in our hearts? That builds faith to continue. So what just starts as a philosophical understanding, a basis, not basis, what's the word? Conviction, a philosophical conviction. It then goes from the head, and then it starts to become a heart realization. And then that heart realization is very beautiful, because what then happens is one could be anywhere and they can have faith in these statements, regardless of whether they're, anywhere in the world. They can be doing anything. And then by that, they can realize that. How nice would that be, that one has this complete confidence? There's a complete confidence in oneself about who they are, what the reality of this world is, what the purpose of their life is, and there's no skew from that. So much of our life is based on hearing so many different statements from other people and thinking, oh, does this make sense? Does that make sense? But when there's this fixedness in faith, it'll be a very sweet experience for us. So those are just a couple of thoughts. So tasting the honey. Yeah. And so then, so I just quickly check. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So we had, when I was thinking about this as well, sometimes these, as I was explaining that, as we go on the path, we'll start to realize these things. But even as we go on this path, sometimes these statements, they seem very lofty. Srila Prabhupada says in one case that, what did he say? Yeah, he says that individuality existed in the past and the individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. How does this work? How, when we hear these statements, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. That's a very lofty statement. To hear that one will never experience any kind of lamentation in themselves. So even though we may be progressing in this path, but we hear these statements that there's no lamentation, that's still a big gap, at least from where I am. And so one thing that was standing out to me was that actually our philosophy is very personal, and Krishna is very personal. In the first canto, the first chapter of that, what happens is that the different symptoms of Kali Yuga are being described. And what happens is the different symptoms are being described, and what's being said is that everyone in this age of Kali is basically, they're always disturbed, they're short-lived, they lack intelligence, they're misfortunate. And so when we hear these things as well, what does it do? Sometimes have you ever been in a conversation with someone and you're speaking to someone, but they really don't really understand where you're at? That you're speaking to them and you're like, okay, this person doesn't really get where I'm at. They may be saying things, but they're not really listening to me. They don't really hear where my heart is at. But by starting off in this premise, what it does is it helps us to feel that, okay, they actually get where I'm at. They actually understand I'm actually here. I'm struggling with all these things. My mind is a wreck. And so then the question is, okay, we hear all these things, and then the question is, okay, when we hear these things, we then have an open heart, isn't it? When we hear that someone's able to relate to us and understand where we're at, then we actually open our hearts and think, okay, maybe this person does understand me. Maybe I can hear this. And then what happens is when we hear with that faith these messages, that's how by hearing this message, that's when it enters our heart. That's when these things become a permanent realization. And then in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.16 it says, Shushusho Shradhadanasya. And so this Shushusho is this hearing, and the Shradhadanasya, Srila Prabhupada translates it as with great care and attention. And in other places, Shraddha, the root Shraddha means faith. And so we can take this as that one hears with faith. And so by hearing with faith, actually these messages become realized. And then it's a very magical process, because you'll then start to see that I'm doing things which by my own conditioning don't make logical sense. They're completely beyond my conditioning that I lived for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. But somehow just by this faithful hearing, I'm experiencing another world. I'm experiencing something different. And then part of this process is that Srila Prabhupada says is that only saintly persons who can see within and without the same Lord, Supreme Lord, can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. And so then what happens on this process is that Srila Prabhupada says only saintly persons who can see. So again, this vision. It's a very interesting point, this point on vision, because sometimes, as Srila Prabhupada is explaining, Srila Prabhupada is very kind actually. He's if we actually read Srila Prabhupada's purports, he's actually, there was one point he says that he's confirmed, where is it? Anyway, I can't find it, but there's a point in the purport where Srila Prabhupada says, even if you accept this part of the Mayavadi philosophy, there would still be a fault in this case. So what Srila Prabhupada is doing, he's even accepting the false arguments. He's even accepting the false arguments of the Mayavadi philosophy and saying, even if you accept them to this degree, even if they're wrong, I'm telling you they're wrong, but even if you don't accept it to that degree, you can defeat it in this way, you can defeat it on that way, you know? And so actually, because Srila Prabhupada is actually, because he's actually seeing the truth, Tadvidi pranipatina pariprashana sevya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana, one who is seeing the truth. And what is this truth? One is seeing that they're an eternal servant of Krishna. Not only are they an eternal servant of Krishna, they're then seeing Krishna in that state. They realize this fact that they don't have any other designations in this world. They don't have any designations that I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm, any of these designations. I'm a wife, I'm a husband. But they've actually realized who they are and they're living in that state. Sarvapadi vinurmuktam tadparevena nirmalam hirshikena hirshikesha sevana bhakti uchite. So when these designations are removed by this process of bhakti yoga, one will then experience individuality. Individuality in the world, if you speak about individuality in so many places, people are trying to be, they're trying to find themselves. You hear all these things, but so much of it is just a mental concoction. And they're just accepting different designations, but actually these are all temporary. And when we actually remove our attachments, remove these designations by this process of bhakti, we'll then actually start to experience that, yeah, I am actually an eternal servant of Krishna. And a very sweet exchange happens here is that what happens is that as we start to experience that we're an eternal servant of Krishna, Krishna's telling us we're an eternal servant and He's the Lord. But actually there's the verse which says, Yayatamam prapadyante. As one approaches me, I will then reciprocate accordingly. Okay? And if we look at that verse a bit more, actually it's a very interesting verse, because when Krishna says that, when we start to then serve Krishna selflessly, what does Krishna then do to us? He'll then start to serve His devotees. We'll start to experience He's serving us in a very sweet and intimate way, and we'll start to see, wait, there are exchanges going on in my life. How is this going on? Krishna enjoys serving His devotees. When Krishna is saying that He's the maintainer, actually what another sweetness is that actually when Krishna comes in the deity form, what does that mean? Krishna is actually being maintained by all the devotees in this case. He's coming under the shelter of His devotees. All the arrangements are being made for the devotees. He's being changed by His devotees into different clothes. He's being arranged all these foods for by the devotees. So in this case, He becomes dependent on His devotees. Where do we hear this dependency? 1866. Krishna says for us to depend on Him. As we depend on Him, what then happens? He then depends on us. And what does this dependence look like? He depends on us in then spreading His word in this world. So a sign of one's increase is that one will gain responsibility. And by this responsibility, one actually becomes very dear to Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada says, he describes this 4th chapter, when another point, he says that what does he say? Yeah, he says, similarly, the mysticism of the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees, and no one else can taste it, as it is stated in the 4th chapter of this book. So that verse basically says that the reason why Arjuna is basically able to taste, he's able to understand this rahasyam, the secret of the Bhagavad Gita, is because he is both Sakyam and Priya. Priya means that he's dear to Krishna, and Sakyam means that he's also a friend to Krishna. And so what does it mean to be a friend? Usually we like to think that, Krishna's got our back. But then when we flip it around, do we have Krishna's back? Have we ever thought that, have I taken myself out and thought, okay, what's Krishna got? What's going on in Krishna's life? how can I assist in Krishna's life? And then when we read the Bhagavad Gita, it then becomes a bit more alive, because then we hear that, okay, why does Krishna come to this world? Okay, maybe I can actually start to partake in that. And why does Krishna come into this world? He comes to annihilate all the miscreants, and then also to help his devotees and protect his devotees. So similarly, that can also be our purpose of living as well. As we start to realize who we are, we then will take that in our heart as the purpose of why we're living. And we'll find as many opportunities to actually make that the mission of our and goal of our life. And so then what then happens is that when we engage in that, this then sweetness is then of an exchange between the devotee and Krishna. And it becomes like a competition. And it becomes a competition that you're trying to serve Krishna. You're trying to serve Krishna as selflessly as possible. And then you start to see that Krishna's taking care of you the whole way. And yeah, Krishna always wins. Krishna is defeated by his devotees, but when he wants his devotees, there's a very sweet pastime when what happens is that Madhavendra Puri, he's basically he's gone all the way to get sandalwood pulp for Gopal. And what happens is when he goes to get this sandalwood pulp, he gets all the way to, I think it's South India he goes to. And then when he gets the sandalwood pulp, he's having difficulties getting out of there. And then what happens is he goes and he takes rest somewhere, and he gets a dream from Gopal. He's staying at I think the Gopinath temple, and he gets a dream to say that I'm not different than the Gopal. So just give that sandalwood to me now. He's gone through all this extensive travel, but because he's seen how much difficulty that he's gone through, it actually pains Krishna's heart that he's seeing his devotee go through so much difficulty. So then he doesn't want him to go through that difficulty anymore. So he then says, okay, don't worry. I'm the same as this deity. So then please, So this is the secret that's then being revealed to us. Yeah. Okay. I think so. We have a few minutes left before the arati. Were there any questions or comments or criticisms? Yeah, I'm sorry, it was a bit wayward. I went from place to place, but yeah. Was there any comments or criticism? Questions? Yeah.
I like that point. Krishna is we have to be for an understanding to it. Like Arjuna, we have to be a friend. It's two-way thing.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, talking that analogy of the map.
Yes.
So you hear something, and if you're going along. I was wondering if you actually give any actual example of what some things you can hear and expect to see along the way.
Yeah, it's a really nice question. So there's a few different statements in our scriptures that we can start to see. A nice example is 1.2.17 Srimad Bhagavatam. In that translation of that, I'll try to get it up, but one of the kind of symptoms is that so it says, so I'll just read the translation. So it says, Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma super soul in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous and properly heard and chanted. So an example of this is like we can test from month to month. Is our desire for material enjoyment decreasing? Do we see that our hankering for matter in our heart, not necessarily an intellectual thing, but in our heart, is that desire still there for matter, or is it diminishing in our heart? It's like, for example, the desires will be there for a long time, but what happens is it's like an amplification of a sound. So at the start, the desires are very loud, but over time they start to become quieter. And then it just becomes, you can easily throw it off. It doesn't become so serious. You don't have to look at it so seriously. Before we're taking those desires very seriously and we're like, oh my God, I need to worry about it. But after some time it's like, okay, no, it's just there. These are just from my past. I'm not that person anymore. So that's just one example, but there's a nice scripture called the Madhurya Kalambini by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, where he outlines the different stages of bhakti from Shraddha to Prema. and as he gives very specific symptoms of what one can expect at different stages. So, for example, at Bhajana Kriya, where one is trying to regulate their life under the guidance of a spiritual master and try to practice their bhajan very sincerely, there's 6 stages of unsteady devotion. So one can then see, okay, am I experiencing any of these stages? And then they can then see, okay, yeah, I see this prominent in my consciousness. Okay, how can I work on this? How can I work on this? How can I adjust? Well, and then we can then inquire, inquire from seniors. I hope that helps. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Any other questions, comments, or yes? Yes, that's a very nice question. So what happened in the past time? Yeah, well, I could. Yes, so Godada Pandit is he's on the right of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As we understand, Godada Pandit is actually the internal potency of the Lord, and so that's Srimati. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So he is Srimati Radharani. That potency is there, and it's actually said that in this part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says that actually Godada Pandit is also I think she has this in her form in Vrindavan or in Mathura, and she has this form of submission. She has this mood of submission. I don't know if she's either Rukmini or Satyam Rukmini. Yeah, so she's Rukmini, and what this means is she has this mood of submission. As sorry. Okay. There's many different nuances, so I don't know specifically, but I think in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it specifically says that there's a mood of submission that she has, and what this means, it's very sweet because what happens is that this same mood then carries into the next body, the next pastime which is going on. That same mood is there in the heart, which is very sweet. I was just reading, I was hearing a class a few days ago, and it was speaking about when Krishna comes out of the womb of Devaki and Vasudeva. Krishna then basically describes about, in this previous birth you were this person and this person. Not just that, I saw the austerities that you were doing. I saw that you used to take a leaf and you used to eat from that leaf. And so it's very sweet because actually when we then start to perfect our life, that actually what will happen is these revelations will start to come to us about, okay, actually Krishna knew about us in past, all these past experiences, all these past lives. Krishna knows about all of them, as it's saying in this verse. How intimate in a relationship is that? We try to look for relationships in this world, but how intimate and sweet is that relationship that someone knows about all the austerities, all the difficulties, everything you've been through in so many previous lives, and they're able to not just accept that, but give you that understanding and praise from within. It's a very sweet exchange. So yeah, sorry, back to this pastime. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, from what I remember, maybe someone can actually add in if they know better than me. But from what I remember is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I think, sends Vallabhacharya to Gadadhar Pandit. And then what happens is Gadadhar Pandit knows Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's heart and knows that he doesn't actually want him to associate with him, because he's actually coming, he's got some pride in terms of his understanding of the Bhagavatam. And he basically wants to preach. He wants to tell everyone else about his understanding of the Bhagavatam. And so Gadadhar Pandit in his heart knows that actually I shouldn't really be spending time with Vallabhacharya. But still he's then there. He then spends some time. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then gets angry that he's still associating with him. But he actually, I think what happens is he knows that he's doing the right thing for some reason or other. I think he's giving his association, or it might be that he's favorable towards him or some reason or other. Do any of you guys know the past a bit better? Yeah, if you do, please.
I think the idea is that submissive,
Yeah.
development as a very submissive mood. Just like when Krishna's trying to get Rumini angry, and he's telling all these things,
Yeah.
no one knows what Varna I am, I run around however much more.
Yeah.
And you basically get divorced from
Yeah.
the
I,
the same with the other pandit. Because it's great Mahaprabhu, he takes on all. Mahaprabhu is Krishna, but he takes on the mood of Srimad Radharani. And so then Gadadhar Pandit, the reincarnation of that eternal potency, but without, it's more the mood of humble service.
mm,
Very, very submissive. And so in this situation with Bhaktacharya, then he's not one to like break out or like cause a scene or anything. But he could be worried that Mahaprabhu won't be happy, but he's actually so connected that he knows Mahaprabhu can see him.
yeah.
So even amidst that, then Mahaprabhu gets more pleased.
Yeah.
Where he is. So these subtle nuances of exchange of between Vaishnava and between devotees of the Lord. But there's so many different layers to it.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope that helps a bit. Yeah, sorry. I know there's a lot more description in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which I'm sure you've read, so yeah. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll conclude there. Okay, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Oh, you have a question? Okay. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.